This Family Life News podcast is made possible by the support of listeners like you.
It's the Noon Report from Family Life, bringing a Christian worldview to what's happening in New York, Pennsylvania, across the country, and around the world. Weather with Kevin Williams, plus special features and reports with the Family Life News team. Now, here's what's happening.
Heartbreaking beyond words. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Webster. That from India's Prime Minister on this morning's crash of Air India Flight 171, which went down in a residential neighborhood minutes after takeoff from Ahmedabad, apparently with no survivors and additional fatalities on the ground. The crash scene understandably chaotic. Rander Jaiswal is with India's Ministry of External Affairs and tells CBS.
What has happened in Ahmedabad is a very tragic accident. We have lost a lot of people.
More than 200 bodies have already been recovered from the scene. Transportation correspondent Chris Van Cleve.
The plane almost looks like it's descending to land. The landing gear is down. That would be indicative, essentially, that this 787 failed to generate enough lift to stay in the air shortly after taking off.
Hassan Shahidi heads the Flight Safety Foundation and says finding the cause of this crash is going to be daunting.
It's still very early in this process. Before investigators can really get in there. It's a very difficult, challenging crash site with residential area, and it's going to take some work to be able to clear that, to make it safe for investigators to actually go in there.
Next to the Middle East, where there's growing tension, nuclear tension, the U.S. has been quietly pulling out some non-essential personnel from the region as reports swirl that Israel has run out of patience with U.S. attempts to broker a nuclear deal with Iran and is preparing a military strike on Iran's nuclear facilities. President Trump.
They are being moved out because it could be a dangerous place, and we'll see what happens.
At a Wednesday hearing, Senator Lindsey Graham popped this question to Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth.
Mr. Secretary, have the Iranians been trying to build a nuke?
There are plenty of indications that they have been moving their way towards something that would look a lot like a nuclear weapon.
Fox's Lucas Toplison says while direct U.S. participation in any strikes on Iran is not expected, our forces are on high alert.
As far as assets go in the region, the USS Carl Vinson aircraft carrier strike group remains off the coast of Oman within striking range of Iran. You also have the B-52 bombers and F-15s on the ramp in Diego Garcia.
Israel is calling reports of an imminent attack by them, quote, fake news. Iran and the U.S. are scheduled to hold another round of nuclear talks this Sunday in Oman. Next to the growing number of anti-ICE protests around the U.S., the sound of pepper balls being shot at protesters in Spokane, Washington last night. Spokane's mayor.
We believe in the right of peaceful protest, and the safety of our community members is always of the utmost importance.
Things were quieter at another protest in San Antonio, Texas.
These protesters took their voices to the streets, taking several laps around the main plaza while calling for justice for every human in the United States. Many of them saying that there is strength in numbers. SAPD was on the sidelines, keeping an eye on things.
Reporter Destiny Fuller. Another night of curfew at Ground Zero for those protests downtown Los Angeles.
We will know who you are, who engaged in this conduct. We will track you down. We will arrest you.
That's L.A. County District Attorney Nathan Hochman. U.S. Marines are expected to join National Guard troops in L.A. by the weekend. President Trump's decision to send in federal troops gets an airing out in a San Francisco courtroom today.
The government is taking the position that indeed this was necessary to call in the National Guard and even the Marines, protect federal officials and federal property, and that the federal court should not be second-guessing the President of the United States in this type of action.
That's Loyola law professor Lori Levinson. With L.A. set to host World Cup soccer a year from now and the Summer Olympics 3 years from now, there was a Senate hearing about security concerns amid the current chaos. Oklahoma Republican Senator James Langford.
They're symbolic targets for those who want to do our nation harm, and we have to be prepared to stop attacks before they happen.
Retired Army Lieutenant General Reynold Hoover is CEO of those L.A. Olympic Games.
The L.A. Olympics will be equal to hosting 7 Super Bowls a day for nearly 30 days straight.
Dr. Gina Leglin is a counterterrorism expert.
I urge you to not only examine the conventional ways the terrorists have attacked global sporting events, but also how technology might change their tactics.
The last time the U.S. hosted an Olympics, the 2002 Winter Games in Salt Lake City. A new Gallup poll shows U.S. public support for pro-life causes holding steady 3 years after the U.S. Supreme Court's Dobbs decision. In fact, the poll revealed a 2 percentage point rise in the number of Americans who say they are pro-life since last year, up to 43% now, close to the numbers that have been seen over the past 20 years. The gap, though, between men and women who say they back abortion rights has widened. 61% of women identifying as such, compared to 41% of men. And some health news, disturbing new data on the number of people dying from alcohol-related liver disease.
Researchers say the findings in JAMA Network Open underscore the urgent need for public health interventions, especially given the increases seen in alcohol consumption following the COVID-19 pandemic.
CBS's Christian Benavides. Still to come here on the Noon Report. New York's governor appears before a congressional committee this morning. Will Pennsylvania's minimum wage be raised? And a bit of Christmas in June.
Good afternoon. I'm Kevin Williams. For most of us, a pleasant day underway. Some changes are on the way. Forecast details are coming up in 10.
All right, thank you, Kevin. Now checking the stories making news where you live in New York and Pennsylvania. We'll start with a quick weather note. An air quality alert in the southwestern and southeastern corners of Pennsylvania right now. The code orange alert means air pollution levels could become unhealthy for children, the elderly, and those with health issues such as asthma, heart disease, or lung disease. Those groups should be careful with outdoor exercise or strenuous activity. New York Governor Kathy Hochul on Capitol Hill this morning before the House Oversight and Government Reform Committees as they meet with so-called sanctuary state governors on illegal immigration.
The very people who go on cable news and rail about the border are the same ones who torpedo bipartisan legislation each and every time. If you truly care about public safety, the economy, human dignity, then sit down, negotiate, have real reform.
Arriving ahead of Hochul was a letter from State Assembly Republicans to the panel, talking about Hochul's visit, challenging her on sanctuary policies, calling them recklessness with taxpayer dollars. They asked those federal lawmakers to ask her why the state didn't change its sanctuary status, about the vetting process for immigrants, and the impact of bail reform on public safety. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz also speaking before that panel today. As the U.S. Open golf tournament gets underway near Pittsburgh today, word that living near a golf course can be hazardous to your health. And we're not talking about some wayward tee shots. A recent JAMA study concluded that the closer you live to a golf course, the greater your risk of developing Parkinson's disease. Researchers say people within 1 to 3 miles of a course face the greatest risk, while conceding they don't have any definitive proof yet of a link at this point. Dr. Rebecca Gilbert with the American Parkinson's Disease Association tells WROC.
It certainly dovetails with lots of other environmental concerns that have been developing over the last number of years to decades, that exposure to pesticides increases your risk.
While out playing at Duran Eastman Golf Course, Ted Strohmeyer said his son has been diagnosed with Parkinson's.
Started off with some tremors in his feet and his hand, and with the type of work he was doing, he was giving injections at the hospital, and obviously that was going to be a big problem for him if, in fact, we couldn't solve that issue.
Medication is helping Strohmeyer's son to continue working. Gilbert says if you have concerns, a water filtration system is one way to safeguard against possible water contaminants. Even as Congress considers a hike in the federal minimum wage, Pennsylvania lawmakers are again floating the idea of a higher state base pay rate. PA minimum wage last went up in 2009 to the current federal rate of $7.25 an hour. Yesterday, in a party line vote, state reps passed 102 to 101, a bill to raise PA's rate on a tiered scale. $15 an hour in Philadelphia, $13 in mid-sized counties, $12 an hour in smaller counties, and phased in over 3 years. The bill's main sponsor, Philly Democrat Jason Dawkins, who tells WPMT,
"We did not want to see a high minimum wage in certain areas that still have a very low economic reality. We want to make sure that we gradually pull people up."
Republican Rep. Wendy Fink.
This minimum wage bill is not right for your county, not right for Pennsylvania. Let the businesses decide what they're going to pay their employees, and if the employees are happy with the pay, then they'll stay.
A 2024 report says less than 1% of Pennsylvanians work for minimum wage. The bill is likely next headed to a committee with no guarantee it's going to emerge again before the current legislative session ends. State lawmakers are also considering allowing self-driving vehicles on Pennsylvania roadways. Here's more on that from our Brian Query.
The bill is being circulated by State Representative Napoleon Nelson and would allow Pennsylvanians to use passenger vehicles equipped with Level 3 autonomous driving capabilities, which gives vehicles the ability to handle all driving tasks, provided the driver can take over when the system allows it. Representative Nelson says he believes the bill would help significantly reduce DUI incidents in the state and improve roadway safety for other motorists, bicyclists, and other forms of transportation. Brian Query, Family Life News.
All right, thank you, Brian. Back to New York now. A 62-year-old man lost his life after a crash involving a manure truck in Genesee County. Yesterday, Joseph Marica was driving that tanker on Arnold Road in Elba when he lost control trying to make a tight right-hand turn. The vehicle ended up rolling over. Marica was pronounced dead at the scene shortly after being extricated. We're in the 100 deadliest days of summer. New York State troopers raising awareness about the dangers of speeding.
Over 1/3 of crashes that were fatal are connected to speeding. That's way too high of a number and has only increased over the years. We want to make sure that people get to those destinations safely and just slow it down.
State Trooper Aga Tinker telling WBNG that drivers can expect to see an increased number of marked and unmarked patrol cars along the highways, which she says is essential to public safety. Staying with transportation, TSA officials say the Real ID requirement is going smoother than expected. Most travelers flying out of upstate New York, good to go.
In upstate New York, it's anywhere from 92 to 94%. Those high percentages continue. We're seeing a lot of people using their passports, which is good because that was one of the things that we were touting before the May 7th enforcement date.
Real ID required for anyone 18 and older. If you don't have the right ID, you'll have to go through some extra screening. Finally, Christmas about to wrap up. Yeah, Christmas in one Western New York town. Here's Family Life's Dee Haley to explain.
Hallmark has spent the past few weeks shining a spotlight on Western New York. The final days of filming are underway and will reportedly include capturing the charm of East Aurora and finishing the last day at Barbell. From Chestnut Ridge to Highmark Stadium to singing carols on Main Street in East Aurora, the movie cast and crew experienced some of the real sights and sounds of the area while filming in the community. Hallmark's Holiday Touchdown, A Bill's Love Story, will air during its countdown to Christmas later this year. Dee Haley, Family Life News.
All right, thank you, Dee. Indiana is keeping pace with the NBA Finals and more. Here's Randy with sports.
Good afternoon, I'm Randy Snavely. Mark, the Indiana Pacers trailed by 5 points when the fourth quarter began, but they outscored Oklahoma City 32-18 in the final frame to grab a 116-107 victory and a 2-1 series lead in these NBA Finals. Benedict Mathurin came off the bench to lead the Pacers with 27 points. Tyrese Halliburton just missed out on a triple-double. He had 22 points, 11 assists, and 9 boards. Jalen Williams paced the Thunder. He finished with 26 points. Let's talk baseball. In Kansas City, Clark Schmidt spun 6 scoreless innings, and Aaron Judge did what Aaron Judge does. He hit his 25th home run of the season. The Yankees down the Royals 6-3. David Peterson is celebrating the first complete game shutout of his career after guiding the Mets to a 5-0 win over the Nationals. Brandon Nimmo provided all the offense New York needed, hitting 2 home runs. The Amazons are on a roll now, winning their 5th straight. In Pittsburgh, a major milestone was passed by Andrew McCutchen. He went past Roberto Clemente's career home run mark with a 3-run shot to help the Bucks claim a 5-2 victory. McCutchen now has 241 long balls and is 3rd on the Pirates' all-time list. Jesus Luzardo righted his ship, bouncing back from 2 terrible outings to pitch 6 innings of 1-run ball against the Cubs. Luzardo also struck out 10 in the 7-2 victory. Elsewhere around the bigs, your winners in the American League: Houston, the Orioles, the Rangers, Minnesota, the Red Sox, and Angels. In the National League, it was the Braves, Dodgers, and Giants. And interleague play saw Cleveland, Arizona, and Toronto come out winners. That is a look at sports.
All right, thank you, Randy. Still to come here on the Noon Report, Faith Under Fire gets focus on the family's response to being labeled a hate group for its Christian views on the LGBTQ plus movement.
Welcome to Breakpoint, a daily look at an ever-changing culture through the lens of unchanging truth. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stonestreet. Well, recently, eminent British theologian and former Bishop of Durham, N.T. Wright, famous for his defense of the doctrine of the resurrection, showed a shocking lack of familiarity with even the most basic moral case against abortion. Answering a question on his Ask N.T. Wright Anything podcast, Wright asserted that abortion can sometimes be the best choice. Quote, "There are many, many cases where it's about the mother's health versus the health of the child. Particularly, as you cited, in cases of rape and cases of incest, there may be a very, very strong argument for saying this ought never to have happened. And with sorrow, because we do not want to do this in principle, but with sorrow and a bit of shame, the best thing to do is as soon as possible terminate this pregnancy." End quote. Wright went on to emphasize that killing a later-term baby is repulsive and rivals the evils of post-birth infanticide, which he called pagan, and said that early Christians were correct to oppose. But what is a later-term baby? Wright said that he doesn't consider himself qualified to answer that question, partly because, and I quote again, "it's very hard for a man to talk about this." Also, he considers men who are dogmatic about abortion to be bullying women. He then said, and I quote again, "I'm not medically qualified to say what point I would draw a line when this is a viable human being that should then be cherished." End quote. So, according to Wright, abortion is sometimes the best course of action, especially in cases of rape, incest, and severe deformity. In these cases, it should be done with sorrow and shame, but as soon as possible to avoid committing the morally repulsive act of late-term abortion, which is comparable to infanticide. But when and where that moral line exists is not for men, as opposed to women, without medical degrees to say, even though he immediately added that viability is the moral line when a child should be cherished. But what he doesn't say is why should abortion be performed with sorrow and shame unless it's wrong? And if it is wrong, then how would killing an innocent human be compassionate for someone suffering deformity? How does another evil undo the evil of rape or incest? And what about the, quote, many, many other cases that he alluded to where it is about the mother's health? And he explicitly included mental health versus the health of a child. Who makes that call? And what kind of abortion couldn't be justified by appealing to mental health? For that matter, why should a human with severe deformity only be killed before birth, but not afterwards? And if Wright doesn't have the credentials or the chromosomes to say when a child should be cherished, how does he know it has anything at all to do with viability in the first place? Look, every one of Wright's arguments are familiar and his inconsistency obvious. But in fact, that's always been the point of these rehashed arguments for abortion. It's a scattershot approach that confuses the issue rather than illuminates it. And they all start with the same premise, that the preborn aren't valuable human beings that need to be protected. And that Wright has absorbed these assumptions and is now repeating them shows that he's either unaware or he's intentionally ignoring the actual case for life. It also shows that even if pro-lifers are tired of making the basic pro-life arguments, we have to continue to make them, even to eminent theologians. In fact, the concise formulation of the pro-life argument by Scott Klusendorf, the author of The Case for Life, exposes every one of Wright's claims. Here it is. Premise 1, it's always wrong to intentionally kill an innocent human being. Premise 2, abortion kills an innocent human being. Conclusion, abortion's always wrong. Even basic truths have to be repeated and defended, even at times to fellow Christians who ought to know better than anyone else. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stonestreet with Breakpoint. Today's Breakpoint was co-authored with Shane Morris, and you can find a version of this commentary that you can either print or share with others by going to breakpoint.org.
All right, now let's check weather. Here's Kevin Williams.
Good afternoon. Here is your Family Life regional weather forecast for this afternoon. Can't rule out an isolated shower or thunderstorm in western and central Pennsylvania, but on balance, partly to mostly sunny skies. High temperatures 70s and low 80s. Tonight, partly cloudy, low down into the 50s. A comfortable night. Tomorrow, mostly cloudy. A couple of showers and thunderstorms, especially in western Pennsylvania in the afternoon. High temperatures upper 60s near Lake Ontario to around 80 in parts of central Pennsylvania. And some showers around Saturday. High temperatures 60s and low 70s.
All right, thank you very much, Kevin. I'm Mark Webster. Thanks again for joining us. This is the Noon Report on Family Life.
This is Faith Under Fire. We take you straight to the voices on the front lines of religious battlegrounds. I'm news anchor Sarah Harnish, and with me today, Focus on the Family spokesperson, attorney Nicole Hunt. We're talking Pride Month. Focus on the Family just got labeled a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center. Tell me what's going on.
For the first time in our 48-year history as an organization, Focus on the Family was listed as a hate group, basically because we're faithful Christians who adhere to the teachings of the Old Testament and the New Testament and biological reality about gender and marriage.
What other groups are on the list? Are there other Christian organizations?
There's actually so many great organizations that have been on their, quote, hate list for so many years, including Alliance Defending Freedom. They're a pro-life, pro-family, pro-marriage legal organization. Family Research Council, one of our allied organizations. Family Policy Council, also an allied organization. Moms for Liberty, they're on the list. And many state-based family policy councils. It's a who's list of impactful Christian organizations that are defending faith-based and common sense reality about marriage and gender.
This is really destructive language to put them on as a hate group, especially with the civil rights background in the United States. It has a totally different meaning to most people. Focus on the Family president, Jim Daly, issued a statement, and I love what he said. Quote, "Conviction makes us anti-sin, not anti-anybody." Are Christians homophobic and intolerant?
Certainly not based on our faith-based worldview. I mean, the truth is that just because Christians believe that men and women and male and female are objective realities and that sex creates babies and should be reserved for natural monogamous marriage, that doesn't make you homophobic or intolerant. And ironically, it would appear that what SPLC is doing by creating this faux hate list is creating a way to hate Christians.
Yeah, all Christian groups would technically be hate groups if they adhere to biblical values. So do we just watch one by one as Christian companies get branded with radical terminology? How do we win the word war?
Yeah, well, that's such a good question because the truth is that this line of reasoning, it doesn't only label Christian groups as hate groups. It would also label any non-Christian group, people of goodwill who adhere to common sense biological truths about reality as a hate group as well. It really is total nonsense. The truth is that SPLC is using this list as a gimmick, to use it as a fundraising tool for their organization because SPLC, it really is a radical organization that's been very careless with the word hate. They throw it around so much that it's really just lost all meaning, and its primary purpose is to help them fundraise for their organization.
What is Focus on the Family doing after making an LGBTQ plus hate list?
Well, I'll tell you what, our first reaction was, what took them so long? Focus on the Family, we've been around since 1977. We're in our 48th year, and we have followed the same guiding principles in our ministry the entire time. The first is the value of male and female, that we are intentionally created, one sex or the other, by God for a purpose, and it's a good purpose. The second one has to do with natural marriage being between one man and one woman. Marriage is a covenant that God designed to model Christ's love for his people and to serve as a public and a private good in our human civilization. And then third, we have a social responsibility to influence culture for God's design and for God's purpose. And so these are things that Focus on the Family has been advocating for decades. We're glad that we finally made the list because we know that we're alongside so many other great organizations who are impacting culture for God's truth and for biological reality. Them calling us names, it really just doesn't bother us at all.
I love that you hold the line and hold the message and probably put a bullhorn to your lips during Pride Month of all the months.
It gives us an opportunity to talk about it and to remind people that we should not be afraid to speak the truth.
Are you seeing a shift nationwide after President Trump, in his inauguration speech, declared that the government recognizes two genders, male and female. Do you sense the climate changing?
Yeah, that's a really great question, because it does appear that the actions of the current administration to push back against the cultural lies of LGBT ideology really is making a difference, with the executive orders coming out, the current administration saying we're not going to accept this. In fact, we're going to pull funding. It has, I believe, helped Americans to have more courage to stand up and to refuse to perpetuate the lies of LGBT ideology. And I would caution that with a follow-up saying that it really is imperative for all Christians and truly any American of goodwill to continue to stand firm on those convictions. We're hearing day in and day out, right, about boys winning all kinds of sports titles in female sports. And it's important. Who's going to stand up for our girls if we don't? Even if the current administration wasn't taking such a strong stand, it really is imperative that the rest of us, and especially Christians, because we know the truth, that we stand firm, unafraid, and have courage to continue to speak the truth to a culture that really has believed the darkness and lies of our culture for far too long.
Despite the hate mongering, the hate lists, and the name calling, right?
That's right.
CNN is running a story this week, and the headline reads, "Big brands are pulling back on Pride merchandise and events this year." Do you think this is the new normal, or is this the new normal just during the Trump presidency?
I hope it's indicative of trending away from the lies of the LGBT movement. But I will say this, all of these businesses, their bottom line is they want to make money. And so it is imperative for the American people, and especially Christians, to continue to convey to these businesses that we don't want to do business that way. And if you're going to do business that way, we don't want to do business with you. Because that conveys to them that these are the things that we value. And by the way, we're going to protect our kids. We're going to protect our marriages, and we're going to make sure that we don't have to walk into Target and see a bunch of LGBT clothes everywhere, or we just won't go there. So it's imperative upon Christians and Americans of goodwill who believe in biological truth and reality to continue to demand truth in marketing and in advertising and in the selling of goods.
And in the bullying, too, and what we allow and what we accept, because it's become normal for large groups like this to propagate hate lists.
Yeah, that's right.
There are Christians that say, let them do what they want to do. Love is love. I won't bother them. They won't bother me. What's wrong with that statement as a believer?
For Christians, we know that if we love our neighbor, we're called to speak the truth to them. We also know that sin has eternal consequences. And as President Daley said, this isn't about calling out or hating any particular group. This is about hating sin. It's about having conviction that sin is wrong. And so as Christians, we know that sin has eternal consequences for our neighbors. And our failure to allow God to use us to speak truth in love to our neighbors in our community is going to allow them to continue on a path of sin. And so I would call all Christians back to the truth that we are to speak love in a loving way, but we are to speak the truth to those around us.
Why do you speak out about Pride Month?
A lot of it comes back to the commandment to love your neighbor as you love yourself, to be honest and to be truthful. I think as an organization, that focus on the family, it comes back to the truth of the fact that we know that human flourishing happens when we value that distinction between male and female, because we're made complementary for one another. And then in marriage, you're able to foster a family and you can build a secure and safe society and community. And all of that builds a strong and safe nation for you to raise your family. I feel like a lot of what drives the Christian narrative comes from love, a place of love, and then also wanting to lead quiet and peaceful lives. And so we have to be willing to stand strong and to be bold so that we can preserve that way of living for future generations.
Have you at Focus on the Family seen victories against LGBTQ plus groups? Do you think that there is a victory on this side of the culture war?
We're praying for it, that's for sure. Organizations like XXXY, which advocates for real women in women's sports, they also just filed a lawsuit because the new law would require that any marketing or advertising that recognizes biological truth about gender is discriminatory and could be sued by the state of Colorado. XXXY, which advocates for the real truth of biological gender, wouldn't be able to even advertise their company or their branding in Colorado without being sued. So there are a lot of fronts where we need to continue to press ahead, unafraid and with courage. And I'm really grateful for the organizations who filed lawsuits against those laws. But I think we can be hopeful that there are this just tremendous tidal wave of support about common sense biological truth that is sweeping the nation at the federal level. We find ourselves in a real culture war today. So we can be encouraged where we're making advances and then continue to fight where there are still fires on the front line.
Learn more at FocusOnTheFamily.com.
All right, thank you very much, Sarah. Catch all of Family Life's original full-length features at Apple Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, and at FamilyLife.org. Just ahead, a happy follow-up on a small dog who went missing in the Australian outback for a very long time.
Went off on walkabout. Walkabout means to wander around and discover new places.
Good afternoon. Here is your Family Life regional weather forecast on the midday weather map. A pair of cool fronts dropping from north to south will have little major impact on our weather for the short term, though a pop-up shower storm will be possible in parts of Pennsylvania. But by the end of the week, moisture will pool along one front. That'll spell some showers and rumbles and some cooler air as well. Let's put that together in forecast form. For this afternoon, can't rule out an isolated shower or thunderstorm in parts of western and central Pennsylvania, but on balance, it's fair with partly to mostly sunny skies, high temperatures 70s and low 80s. Tonight, partly cloudy, low temperatures down into the 50s, a comfortable night. Tomorrow will turn out mostly cloudy, a couple of showers and thunderstorms, especially in western Pennsylvania in the afternoon. High temperatures upper 60s near Lake Ontario to around 80 in parts of central Pennsylvania. And some showers around Saturday, especially in Pennsylvania. High temperatures cool, 60s and low 70s.
Okay, thank you very much, Kevin. Finally at noon, in the movie Crocodile Dundee, you might remember Mick said he went on walkabout for 18 months in the Australian bush. And Valerie, the mini dachshund, almost matched that in real life. On a family vacation, the plucky little dog went missing in a place called Kangaroo Island. Despite a long, frantic search, eventually the family had to give up, the owner telling NPR.
The decision to leave the island was probably the hardest decision I think I've ever made in my life.
But they never lost hope, and neither did locals who set traps hoping to nab her, assuming larger wildlife didn't beat them to it. And 529 days later, bingo! Valerie got trapped and somehow not only survived, but apparently thrived, even gained some weight during her cruising around the island.
She's kind of come back a little bit more independent. She's got the physique of like a little bodybuilder.
And Valerie beating the odds in the outback has proven a source of inspiration to those who followed her saga to its happy ending.
You know, if a tiny little 4-kilo sausage dog can survive on Kangaroo Island in the Australian bush, then, you know, you too can survive whatever it is you're going through.
An uplifting story from Down Under. And that's the world we live in for Thursday, June 12th, 2025. As always, we thank you for listening. I'm Mark Webster, Family Life News.
You've been listening to The Noon Report, heard weekdays on Family Life. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening to this Family Life News podcast. If you've been encouraged by what you've heard, please share it with others and click the subscribe button to automatically receive future episodes. Family Life is a listener-supported ministry. Podcasts like this are made possible by your financial partnership. Find out more at FamilyLife.org.